Hello, and welcome to Owning It, the podcast that celebrates the inspiring choices made by women who refuse to simply follow the crowd and chose the road less traveled. I'm your host, Sandhya Thukaram, and in each episode, we'll have real conversations with these incredible women who choose to carve their own path because following just isn't an option. They may not be making headlines, but every one of them is a role model. So join me and let's explore the power of choice and the inspiration it brings right here on Owning It. My guest today, Kruttika Nadig, Senior Software Engineer at Logically Bengaluru, is all about owning her choices every step of the way. From a grandmaster chess player as a child, to journalist and travel writer, to finally making a 360 transition to becoming a software engineer, Kruttika's story shows us impossible is nothing. Join me as she shares her intriguing story. Kruttika, hi. Thanks for joining me on Owning It. In a sense, today is the first day we've seen each other online virtually, but I enjoyed learning a little bit about your journey in our previous conversation and the friend that connected us. And I can't wait to share your story with the world. So thank you for joining me. I want to start, Kruttika, where I always start. It's usually go back in time, but unlike a lot of us, you're taking us back to a point in time in your youth or when you were a young girl is a very accomplished time in your life. You started to play chess at 8 and you went on to be a competitive chess player. Take us back to that time in your life, what it meant to be a competitive chess player, child prodigy, and what were your aspirations at that time, Kruttika?
Thanks so much for inviting me to your podcast, Sandhya. Really glad to be here having this conversation. It's been a long journey. I was a competitive chess player for a long time. Started playing when I was 8, just learning the basics and so on. And I played very seriously and competitively for about 10 years, from the time that I was about 11 years old, and actually started winning some tournaments, first at the state level and then at the national level. Um, uh, Bit wary of the word prodigy because in the chess world we actually apply these words to people like Anand and Carlsen, so it's flattering as well as a bit overwhelming and embarrassing to be called that. um, but yes, I mean that was life for a really long time, and it was sort of organic. My chess career, it wasn't something that was planned out when I was a child. One thing just happened after the other. So I started out playing state championships in the children's categories, won a few of those, and then went on to win the nationals. So the next steps was sort of very obvious. You win the state championship, you go on to play the nationals, then you represent the country, and things just happen that way. And I would say that those 10 years were like a whirlwind of tournaments and excitement, adrenaline, lots of highs and lows, lots of extreme emotions. um, Quite different from I guess a lot of people's childhood, in the sense that I had to grow up pretty fast because you're exposed to the world very fast, when you're in a field like that, traveling without parents, with coaches, with managers, and representing the country. So it was a very intense and interesting time of life. uh, I think of it as another lifetime.
Did you enjoy it at that time as a young person and training, like you said, is intense and your life is about managers and coaches and traveling? And it sounds very exciting to me from the outside. But as a young Kritika, between the ages of 11 till you were 18, was that the phase? Was it
Yeah, till
something?
till I finished my undergraduate degree, so till I was about 21, that was the time that I was playing very seriously as a professional.
And you enjoyed it and you owned it and you felt this was the choice you were making?
So I wouldn't say that it was a conscious choice. I was just sort of being propelled forward by events rather than decisions. There wasn't that much time to pause and think and reflect, and that also wasn't really something. Uh, one was doing at the time, at that age.
Yeah.
You-
Yeah.
is Unfortunately, I don't think I fell in love with chess.
Mm.
Um, like a lot of players do. So that didn't happen. I don't think I ever called it my passion, even though it was my
Mm.
career.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would even wonder if something was wrong with me because I didn't have this feeling. I would look around me and, I could see that my contemporaries, many of them were clearly chess lovers, but I wasn't as such, although I was playing full time.
So you've played competitively. It was something that naturally evolved from playing. You went on to doing events and things came to you, but somewhere there, you, like you said, you didn't fall in love with it. And so at 21, after a fairly good run, uh, at something that was a way of life, but not necessarily your passion, you decide to change the course of your life. You decide to embark on a career, or at least the path of journalism. And at
Yeah.
21 is when you went on to study a journalism course.
I didn't treat chess as an end in itself. I didn't, fully immerse myself in it. It was more like a means to an end, where I suppose the end was, sort of state of mythical happiness that I was trying to achieve. So I had a particularly good year. This was about, I think, 2008, 2009. I had a really good year in which I won my third national championship, won a couple of medals in Asian and Commonwealth championships, and I also became a woman grandmaster, which is a title given.
Amazing.
Yeah, thanks. So that's a title given by the World Chess Federation. So that was a really good year, and as that year was coming to an end, I had this feeling like, okay, this is great. I feel happy. I'm in a good place, and this feels like a good time to sign off. Because I had been feeling slightly uneasy and not sure whether I wanted to do this for very much longer as a professional. And it just happened to coincide with the time that I had finished undergrad. So it also seemed like, okay, now I can actually transition into something else. And I didn't feel like I had a ton of options in terms of career because chess had been my career. I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to coursework in school and college. My attendance rate was not great because I was constantly traveling all around the country and the world. Um, but I had always been fond of reading and writing and
Mm.
literature, and I had this sense that I should do something related to writing. Um, so around this time, I mean, I was also sharing these thoughts with my parents, and my dad, who was there then, but he passed away soon after that. But at that time, he said to me, "Okay, why don't you study for the CAT? Try and get into the IIMs or something." And I actually briefly considered that, but
Mm.
I sort of didn't want to do it. I think I was also looking to do something that would be a little comforting. And I
Mm.
found reading and writing comforting at that point, coming out of the very high stress world of chess. So I thought that, okay, let me explore journalism. So yeah, I applied to the Asian College of Journalism and got in, and that was the beginning of the sort of second phase of my career.
The 20s.
Yes.
What was the reality of that? You've made a new choice. What were the 20s and being a journalist like?
So obviously it wasn't soothing. I was very naive when I thought that journalism would be comforting in any way. I think the 20s were just all about, I mean, for me, it was, I would say, a recovery phase where
Mm.
I was just trying to figure out how I could lead an interesting life in the world, which outside of the chess world.
Mm.
Just sort of experimenting and trying to see what can I do, what kind of life can I lead. So I did a whole bunch of things in my 20s. I wouldn't call myself a journalist, but I would call myself a writer because
Mm-hmm.
I moved away from news writing into feature writing quite soon after college. And I mean, it was just all about trying new things and taking risks for me.
What were some of those things?
I got a job at the Times Group, which I had really been looking forward to. And then I quit in 4 months because I didn't find it interesting enough. I took up travel writing assignments in like really far-flung parts like Nagaland and so on, like not knowing what I'll be getting into, but just going
So you
anyway.
actually traveled and wrote.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was a travel writer for a few years. A few things like that. I also started my own business in my mid 20s. So I started a co-working space in Pune, and this was before. This was a couple of years before WeWork, etc.
So you were really
Opened
ahead
up.
of the
Yeah.
curve in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that for a year, and I mean, I was quite involved in it. Like I got paying customers in the first week. The 20s were largely about figuring out what I liked to do and what I could do, and things started to turn in my late 20s when I started to feel like I needed to make some changes. I had sort of been, although physically I had been really adventurous, but mentally I was very much in a comfort zone
Mm.
where, in terms of, actual learning and, professional achievement, I felt like I needed to maybe start, pushing myself a little bit in one particular direction. So when I was about 28, I decided to move away from home. I was living with my parents. I started applying for jobs in Bombay because I felt like I need to, sort of change things, just sort of
You
mix
need a
it up
new
a little bit.
environment. Yeah.
Exactly. So I got a job in Bombay and I moved away. And although this was a couple of years before I transitioned into a tech career, but I think this was also a turning point for me. It was a turning point for my way of thinking, probably
So what
because
was this job?
so this was also a writing job. This was with a firm that was working in the museum design sector. So I was doing some research and writing for museum exhibits. So I've had like a variety of writing gigs in my 20s, each one more different than the last. It wasn't just the job, it was also, moving to Bombay again. It was the second time that I was in Bombay, but this time I was older.
You could embrace the city for what it was.
And I also began to realize that I need to start planning my life a little bit because Bombay is challenging
Yeah.
and expensive, and it's not so easy to just go with the flow over there. You need to sort of start planning a little bit about okay, how are you going to survive, what are you going to do next, and so on. At least that's how I felt. That's when I started thinking about okay, how do I actually try and give some direction to my career now?
20 sounded like an adventure where you were experimenting and you were trying to figure out what to do. Did you enjoy it, or was it mentally tough? Or is it something you said, no, I'm very clear that I'm experimenting to get somewhere?
I was very happy to not have a plan
Okay.
in
No,
my
and that's
20s.
lovely. And that's a choice too, right? Yeah.
Yes, because like I mentioned, I now in hindsight, it feels like it was a recovery period for me where I was trying to not constrain myself too much because my identity had very strongly and firmly become that of a chess player.
Mm.
Like throughout my childhood, whenever I met people, they would be like, "Oh, you're the girl who plays chess," and that continued, for a long time, even after I had stopped playing professionally. That was a very strong identity that I had, and I guess I was subconsciously trying to not fit into any one box
Mm.
after having decided to move on from that.
So it was your unboxing phase.
Yes, you could say that. Yeah, unboxing myself, trying to figure
Yeah.
out what's inside. So, yeah, so I was pretty sure that I wanted to take those kind of risks and go on those kind of adventures
And that's
in my
amazing.
20s. Yeah, I also had a really supportive family. So although my lifestyle had changed completely, from like being a professional chess player who had like a certain training routine, tournament schedule, etc., and to becoming someone who was now doing other things in life, and it wasn't just professionally, but even I think my personality was changing,
Mm.
because of the exposure to
Newer things and
newer
different things.
things, newer
Yeah.
people. So in fact, one funny thing is that so I have some lovely friends from college, from ACJ. A lot of them became my friends several years after college, not in college.
Mm.
And and one of the things that they would say to me is that, we didn't like you in college. They say that we didn't like you in college, and when I asked why, they said it was because you were really cold and closed, and we thought that you're
Mm.
arrogant. So coming from the from
From a more
the
regimented kind of
exactly, yeah,
existence, it took you
exactly.
a
So
while
coming
to.
from there, it took a while to honestly even to pick up, very simple socialization skills, I would say,
Yeah.
in a sense, because chess was a very different, disciplined,
And it's
individualistic sort
all,
of
yeah, and
world.
it's really individual in that sense. So you spoke about this unconscious choice to experiment, to discover new things and open yourself to a different kind of life, which you did. And so in hindsight, you don't think it was risky, and you don't think it was an exhausting, or it caused you anxiety. It was something you did because you wanted to do, which is lovely.
Absolutely.
And then you
Yeah.
came to Bombay, and Bombay, like we touched on briefly, forces you to ask a few questions. You also met your husband there. So it opened you up to a new world and a new perspective. Then
Yeah.
what?
When I was in Bombay, I started thinking about things like, what I want my life to start shaping up to be like. And one thing that started becoming more and more clear to me was that I need to make more money.
Mm.
So, I mean, I've always been earning. I started earning at a very young age because of the prize money, and the scholarship money and so on. So I'd always been sort of financially self-sufficient.
Independent. Yeah.
Yeah, but once I was in my late 20s and in Bombay, I also started realizing that I need to make more money, and I need to start making a financial plan, or having some kind of sustainable savings habit, to sort of plan for my life ahead. And the kind of writing gigs that I was picking up weren't really going to cut it, was what I figured, because they were great in terms of the kind of writing that I could do, the kind of people I was meeting, and the experiences and so on. But not very great in terms of actual compensation. So so I started looking around, and one big decision that I made was to apply for a corporate job.
Mm.
So I sort of found this position at Amazon, which was like content marketing. It was related to their publishing business. So I thought, okay, I've been a writer, so this seems like it might be a good fit. So I prepared and applied, and I sort of got that job. Um, and that job was the turning point, because it was terrible. I unfortunately happened to find myself in a position that turned out to be really stressful and kind of toxic in several ways. And just working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, and it never seemed to end. There was also a lot of things that I'd never encountered before, like workplace politics, etc. I felt like, okay, these are not the things that I want to spend my time on. There has to be something that's like better suited. So I stuck it out like for a year, and then a year into it, I decided that I want to move on. And then there was this huge crisis, really, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do next.
Mm.
I felt like I had probably reached the most financially rewarding kind of job that a writer could get, in a
And you
sense.
didn't, you hated it.
I hated it. So I didn't want to go back to what I was doing, but I also didn't know what to do. So I was just thinking about, what I should do. And my husband said to me, "Why don't you learn how to code?
Mm.
I think you'd be a great coder." And I said, "That doesn't make any sense."
Ah, yeah.
Like I'm not. I don't have an engineering degree. Like to me, this was always something that people did after they had taken science, done engineering, then
Yeah.
IT, etc. That's the path. So I said, why? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. He wasn't saying it for the first time. He had said it before as well. Yeah,
Interesting.
just a few months after we'd met, and I hadn't taken it seriously then. But he said, no, I think, you've been a chess player. You should give this a shot. I feel like you might have the aptitude. So I started thinking about it, and I had sort of been dabbling with the data analytics side of things at my corporate job, because I was in the marketing team. So we had to like do sort of make like these regular reports and dashboard
Dashboards.
analysis,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. So I was like, okay, maybe there is some kind of link here. I don't know. Let me explore it. So I decided that I would explore this, and I started teaching myself how to code.
Mm.
So this was, I think I was just into my 30s then, and it was obviously like a completely new universe, and it was very hard. It was very hard to start learning something new, which was so different from anything I'd done before. Uh, but I basically took a year off to study.
Mm.
So people were aghast. They said, you quit your job at Amazon, and now you're just sitting at home and looking at some books. Like, what are you doing?
Mm.
When I put in my notice, there were people in the company who sort of messaged me, and they said, oh, congrats, are you moving to Google? And I said, no, that's not what's happening here.
I'm going to
So
learn how to code, which I've never
yeah.
done in my life.
Yeah.
Great.
So, fortunately, I found the right kind of resources. So I did a classroom course for 6 months, and then I also, was studying on my own using books, etc. There's this one book I have. It's called. I bought it several years ago. It's called "Learn Python the Hard Way," and the introduction to that book really spoke to me, because the author, he said things like, "You'll find this book difficult. If all of your life people have told you that you're gifted or you're a prodigy, and therefore you're afraid to do something new because it'll make you look stupid, or
How wonderful, though.
yes." And I was like,
It
"Oh
was
my god."
both. It's empathetic and challenging.
Yes,
Both.
yes. So
Yeah.
there were things like this. Fortunately, I encountered some really nice pieces of advice and encouragement as I was studying, that made me feel like, okay, this is actually something I might be able to do, if only I can overcome these barriers in my mind to to pick up a new skill, to practice that new skill, because it requires a lot of practice day after day,
Mm.
to learn a new technical skill, especially in your 30s and later,
Yeah.
I think so. So yeah, I did that for a while, and I also read this really fantastic book by Cal Newport. I don't know
Mm.
if you've heard of him. He's famous for his book Deep Work,
Mm.
but there's another one that he wrote before that. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Wow.
And I read that one, during that phase when I was teaching myself programming, and it introduced me to this concept of career capital,
Mm.
which is, I mean, the definition of that is something like, career capital are those valuable and rare skills that you have, which you can use as leverage to get what you want in your career as you move forward.
Mm.
And for me, my career capital was my chess experience and my writing experience.
Yeah.
So I when I reflected on it, I felt that, okay, for all of those years that I have been a chess player, clearly I have trained my mind to be good at certain kinds of thinking patterns. And in all of the years that I've been a writer, clearly I have gained a lot of exposure and probably other skills, multidisciplinary skills, that should help me anywhere, in any field that I choose. So as a result, when I started looking for my first tech job, as a data scientist slash data engineer, I consciously was looking for a role where I would be able to use some of my career capital.
I just have had to interrupt because I think that's such a powerful idea. And anybody listening, if there's something they should take away, I think this is something, because I completely agree with it. Because when you're transitioning and moving, you're always looking at JDs from a very kind of unnuanced external perspective. And you always struggle to say, okay, but what is it? But when you're very clear about your career capital, despite what you've done and all the different things, there are a few things that we build that is very unique to us and our
Yes.
strengths. And if we're very clear about that, most jobs actually become very relatable, because you can
Yes,
see what you bring to the table then. So
that's
sorry, I
right.
wanted to pause because I think that's a really powerful idea.
Yeah.
So moving from there.
Yeah,
So
you're
yeah.
absolutely right. That's how I would generalize it as well. And that also helps you figure out what's not a good fit
Yeah.
for you, So I certainly didn't want to, go for the kind of programming jobs where I would only be in one programming box,
Yeah.
and everything that I had done since the age of 11 would just be meaningless.
Mm.
I certainly didn't want that. So I applied for a job with a smaller not-for-profit tech company called Tattle, where I would be coding, and I would be doing a bit of machine learning, a bit of data science, but I would also be supporting the team with communications, strategy, etc.
You liked the different aspects of this opportunity and it didn't box you. And
Yeah.
tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so that was great. I got lucky, worked with some great people, and it's so now I've been doing this for a few years. I work for a different company now, logically, and so when I actually moved in onto this path of becoming a programmer is when I actually started thinking about things like, okay, where do I want to be in 3 years and 5 years? I had never thought about that all my life. And then I started setting these goals like, okay, I want to be a senior engineer in this much time. These are the skills I want to pick up, etc. And I started sort of tracking that. And I have gotten better at keeping track of where I'm going now. So, the whole 20s ethos of going with the flow is far behind me. I think I'm a different person now, in a sense. So I actually now try and track my progress every few months to see whether I have learned something, have I done something meaningful, what do I want to do next. So yeah, that's where it's at now.
So, as someone listening to your story, it's not as happenstance as one would think, because there's almost like everything you did was setting you up for where you are. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, like you said, I loved the fact that chess, after all, got its place back in your life, not as chess, but the ability to how you think, that you applied when you decided to approach what you wanted to do in your 30s. And the exposure of your 20s, in a way, also contributed to perhaps just taking it on, right?
Yeah.
The ability to take something entirely new, and one wouldn't actually say that would be a next step. So I think that's a phenomenal story, Kruttika. I'd actually want to end here because I think there's just so much that you've shared. But perhaps a closing thought. Uh, chess came to you. Adventure is what happened over the next few years. Do you think this is the progression, or you don't know what next?
The difference now is that this third career that I've chosen myself has been a very deliberate and thought through choice. It's not just something I've stumbled into.
You've been
um,
intentional about it.
I've been very intentional and organized about it this time around. So I definitely want to give this the time it deserves. So I think it takes about 10 years, to become good at something. That's probably why I became, good at chess. Um, so I want to give it at least that much time, and I think I can. And I want to give that a chance. I want to see how far I can go on this path.
I think it's an amazing road less traveled. which is what these stories and conversations are. And keep owning it, Kruttika. And maybe 10 years later, we'll have another conversation. I hope we continue to chat in between. But 10 years later, we'll see where the fourth phase will be.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thanks so much, Sandhya. It was great chatting with you.
With every conversation with women who are taking control of their narrative, I'm constantly inspired. Don't forget to tune into the next conversation with yet another woman choosing her own path and owning it.